Veronica couldn't breathe. The smoke had filled her apartment so quickly she'd barely made it out of bed before the black cloud swallowed everything. She'd dropped to her knees, like they always said to do in those fire safety videos she'd never paid attention to, crawling toward where she thought the door should be. But the heat was everywhere, pressing down on her chest, burning her throat with every desperate gasp. Her lungs screamed for air that wasn't there. She couldn't find the door. Everything looked the same in the darkness, just rolling smoke and the orange glow somewhere behind her that was getting brighter, hotter, closer. Her arms gave out. The carpet pressed against her cheek, rough and hot, and she thought with strange clarity that this was how it ended. Alone on her bedroom floor at 38 years old, in her oldest pajamas, because she'd been too tired after her shift at the clinic to do anything but collapse into bed. The darkness at the edges of her vision wasn't just smoke anymore. Then there were hands on her, strong, sure, lifting her like she weighed nothing. She tried to open her eyes, but the smoke stung too badly. All she registered was solid muscle and the distinct smell of smoke gear and something else, something clean and masculine underneath it all. A voice, deep and commanding, cutting through the roar of the fire. "I've got you. Stay with me." She couldn't stay with him. The darkness swallowed her whole. When she came back, it was to pressure on her mouth. Firm lips sealed over hers, breath pushing into her lungs, forcing them to expand. Her chest rose and fell with someone else's rhythm. Again, again. A hand cradled the back of her head, tilting her jaw just right, while another hand rested on her sternum. She gasped, coughed, and her eyes flew open. The most beautiful man she'd ever seen was pulling back from her mouth, his face inches from hers. Dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, soot smeared across one sharp cheekbone, and eyes, God, those eyes, a startling blue-gray that locked onto hers with an intensity that made her forget she couldn't breathe a moment ago. "There you are," he said, and his voice wrapped around her like velvet and smoke. "Stay with me this time." She realized she was flat on her back on the grass outside her building, and he was kneeling over her, one hand still cradling her head, the other now pressed against her cheek. His thumb brushed her temple in a gesture that seemed far too tender for a professional rescue. "Can you breathe?" he asked, and she managed a nod, even though her throat felt like sandpaper. "Good, that's good. I'm Alexander. I'm not going anywhere, okay? You're safe now." The paramedics swarmed in then, but Alexander didn't move away. He stayed right there, his large frame blocking out the chaos of the fire trucks and the growing crowd of neighbors, his hand still touching her face like he had every right to. Like he couldn't stop himself. "Sir, we need to," one of the paramedics started. "I'm staying with her," Alexander said, not even looking at them. His eyes never left Veronica's face. Through the oxygen mask they strapped over her nose and mouth, Veronica stared back at him. She should tell him she was fine, that he could go, that there were probably other people who needed him, but the words wouldn't come. Because she wasn't fine, and the thought of him leaving made panic claw at her chest, worse than the smoke had. He seemed to read it on her face. His hand slid down to wrap around hers, engulfing her smaller fingers completely. "I'm not going anywhere," he said again, quieter this time, meant only for her. They loaded her into the ambulance, and Alexander climbed in right behind her without asking permission. The paramedic raised an eyebrow, but didn't protest, maybe because of the look on Alexander's face that said arguing would be pointless. He positioned himself right beside the gurney, still holding her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm that should have been soothing, but instead sent little sparks of awareness up her arm. Veronica couldn't stop looking at him. Now that the immediate terror had faded, she could actually see him. The firefighter coat hung open, revealing the dark t-shirt underneath that clung to a torso that was pure muscle, broad shoulders, defined chest, arms that had lifted her out of that apartment like she was nothing. He had to be at least 6'3", maybe taller, and every inch of him radiated strength and competence and something else she couldn't quite name but felt deep in her belly. He caught her staring, and something flickered in those storm cloud eyes. His jaw tightened. The hand holding hers squeezed just a fraction tighter. "How bad is your place?" she managed to rasp out, her voice wrecked from the smoke. "Don't worry about that right now," he said, but his expression went dark. "The building's not coming down, but your unit took heavy damage. You won't be able to stay there for a while." The reality hit her then. Her home, everything she owned, gone or ruined. She had insurance, but that didn't help her tonight, or tomorrow, or next week. Where was she supposed to go? "Hey," Alexander leaned closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face again, and God help her, she leaned into that touch. "We'll figure it out. You're not alone in this." We. Like he had any stake in her life. Like he was planning to be involved in what came next. She should tell him that wasn't his job. That he'd done his part by pulling her out and breathing life back into her lungs. And oh God, his mouth had been on hers, his breath in her body, and now she couldn't stop staring at his lips and wondering if that clinical rescue kiss counted, or if she'd ever know what it felt like when he kissed her because he wanted to. This was insane. She'd almost died an hour ago, and here she was, having completely inappropriate thoughts about the firefighter who'd saved her life. What was wrong with her? But then his thumb stroked across her cheekbone, achingly gentle, and she saw the way he was looking at her, like she was precious, like she mattered, like he'd personally take on anyone or anything that tried to hurt her. And she knew with sudden, terrifying certainty that she wasn't the only one having inappropriate thoughts. At the hospital, Alexander refused to leave her side. He stayed through the examination, the chest x-rays, the endless questions from doctors and nurses. When they finally put her in a room for overnight observation, just to be safe, they said, because of the smoke inhalation, he pulled a chair right up next to her bed and settled into it like he was planning to spend the night. "You should go," Veronica said, her voice still raspy. "Your shift must be over by now. You've done more than enough." "My shift ended 2 hours ago," he said calmly. She blinked. "Then why are you still here?" His eyes met hers, and the heat in them made her breath catch. "Because I can't leave you alone. Not yet." Not yet. Implying there would be a time when he could, when he would. But that time wasn't now. "Alexander." "Xander," he interrupted. "Call me Xander." The nickname felt intimate in a way his full name hadn't, like something reserved for people close to him, people who mattered. She shouldn't use it. She should maintain distance, keep this professional, thank him politely, and send him on his way. "Xander," she heard herself say, and watched satisfaction flash across his face. "You really don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. The position brought him closer, put him in her space in a way that should have felt intrusive, but instead made her feel safer than she had since she'd woken up to smoke. "I want to. Let me want to, Veronica." The way he said her name, like he was tasting it, savoring it, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. This was wrong. He was a firefighter. She was a victim he'd rescued. There were probably rules about this, boundaries that existed for good reasons. He'd given her mouth to mouth, carried her out of her burning apartment, and now he was sitting at her bedside like a boyfriend or a husband, not a public servant who'd been doing his job. She should tell him to go, should thank him for saving her life and let him return to his own. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Did you eat dinner?" His lips curved into a slow smile that did devastating things to her pulse. "No. Did you?" Hard to eat when you're unconscious from smoke inhalation. "Smart mouth," he said, still smiling. "I like that." He stood, and she had to tilt her head back to keep looking at him, because God, he was tall and broad, and her hospital bed suddenly felt very small. "I'll find us some food. Don't go anywhere. I'm hooked up to an IV and a heart monitor. Not sure where I'd go." "Good," he said, and there was something possessive in his tone that she absolutely should not find attractive. "Stay right here. I'll be back." He was back 15 minutes later with cafeteria sandwiches and coffee that was probably terrible but tasted like heaven. He ate sitting in that chair pulled up close to her bed, and they talked about nothing important, about everything. She learned he'd been a firefighter for 8 years, that he had a younger sister in college, that he did woodworking in his spare time because he liked creating things with his hands. She told him about her job as a nurse practitioner, about the patients she saw every day, about how she'd moved to this city 3 years ago for the position and still hadn't made many friends because she worked too much. She didn't tell him about her ex-boyfriend who'd said she was too boring, too focused on work, not exciting enough. She didn't tell him she'd spent the last year wondering if he was right, if there was something fundamentally wrong with her that made her unworthy of being chosen, being wanted. But somehow, with Xander looking at her like she was the most fascinating woman he'd ever met, those old insecurities felt distant and unimportant. "You should get some sleep," he said eventually, glancing at his watch. It was past midnight. "So should you," she countered, "at your own home, in your own bed." "I'll sleep here." He gestured at the chair like it was perfectly reasonable to spend the night in an uncomfortable hospital chair. "Xander, that's ridiculous." "Veronica." He leaned forward again, and this time he took her hand, threading his fingers through hers in a way that felt far too natural. "I need to know you're okay. I need to see you breathing, see color in your face, see you awake and talking to me. Humor me. Let me stay." How was she supposed to argue with that? How was she supposed to resist the raw honesty in his eyes, the protective instinct that radiated from him in waves? "Okay," she whispered, and watched relief wash over his features. She fell asleep with his hand still holding hers, his thumb tracing those maddeningly gentle circles on her palm, and she didn't have a single nightmare because some part of her knew he was there, watching over her, keeping her safe. When she woke in the morning, he was still there. His dark hair was mussed, stubble shadowed his jaw, and he'd shed his firefighter gear at some point during the night and now wore just jeans and that dark t-shirt that showed off every line of his powerful build. He looked tired and rumpled and absolutely gorgeous, and Veronica's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep in a way that was completely unfair. "You actually stayed." "I told you I would." He stretched, rolling his shoulders, and she tried very hard not to stare at the way his muscles moved under the thin cotton. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she admitted. The oxygen had helped. The rest had helped. Having him there had helped in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. "They're probably going to discharge me soon." Something flickered across his face. Concern, she thought, or maybe calculation. "Where will you go?" The question she'd been avoiding. "I'll figure something out. Maybe a hotel until—" "No." She blinked at the flat refusal in his tone. "No? You're not staying in some hotel alone." He stood, pacing to the window and back, agitation in every line of his body. "You have smoke inhalation. You should be monitored. You need—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. "I need what?" she prompted. His eyes locked on hers, intense and burning. "You need someone to take care of you, and I'm not letting it be anyone else." Her breath caught. This was definitely not professional. This was not the appropriate response of a firefighter to someone he'd rescued. This was something else entirely, something dangerous and thrilling and completely inadvisable. "Xander, we just met." "I gave you mouth to mouth," he said, his voice dropping lower, rougher. "I breathed air into your lungs. I felt your heart start beating again under my hands. Don't tell me we just met. I've been inside you, Veronica. I've been as close to another person as you can get." Heat flooded her face, her neck, her entire body. The way he said it, the double meaning hovering in the air between them. She couldn't breathe again, but this time it had nothing to do with smoke. "That's not— You were saving my life," she managed. "I was." He moved closer, and she found herself pressing back against the pillows, not in fear, but in automatic response to all that masculine intensity focused solely on her. "And now I can't stop thinking about your mouth. Can't stop tasting you on my lips. Can't stop replaying the moment you opened your eyes and looked at me like I was your whole world." "Xander, come home with me." He leaned down, bracing his hands on either side of her bed, caging her in, surrounding her with his size and heat and the clean, masculine scent of him. "Stay at my place until yours is habitable again. Let me take care of you, please." She should say no, should tell him this was moving too fast, that she needed space to process the trauma and figure out her next steps, and definitely not complicate everything by staying with the firefighter who'd rescued her and was looking at her like he wanted to devour her. But God, she wanted to say yes, wanted it so badly it scared her. "I don't think that's a good idea," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because—" How did she explain this? "Because you're looking at me like that. Because I'm looking at you like this. Because something's happening here and it's too soon, too fast, too everything." "Something's been happening since the moment I saw you through that smoke," he said quietly. "Since I lifted you into my arms and knew I'd tear that whole building down to get you out. Since I put my mouth on yours and felt your breath mix with mine and knew I'd never be the same. This isn't too fast, Veronica. This is inevitable. Inevitable." Like he'd already decided how this was going to go. Like she didn't get a vote. She should be angry about that. should tell him he was being presumptuous, overstepping, completely out of line. Instead, she heard herself say, "What if I can't stay away from you? What if I do something stupid?" His eyes went molten. "Like what?" "Like kiss you," she whispered. "Like forget all the reasons this is a bad idea and just..." He made a sound low in his throat, almost a growl, and his hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing over her lower lip. "That's not stupid. That's the smartest thing either of us could do. We met 12 hours ago." 13, he corrected. "And I don't care. I haven't been able to think about anything else. Haven't wanted to. You could have died last night, Veronica. Life's too short to pretend we don't want things. And I want you. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment. I want them all." She was drowning again, but this time in the heat of his gaze, the certainty in his voice, the overwhelming presence of him. This beautiful, commanding man who'd saved her life and now wanted to claim it. "Say yes," he urged, his voice dropping to something dark and persuasive. "Come home with me. Let me keep you safe." Against every bit of common sense she possessed, Veronica whispered, "Yes." His smile was triumph and desire and possession all rolled into one devastating expression. "Good girl." The praise went straight through her like liquid heat, settling low in her belly. She was in so much trouble. The discharge process took another 2 hours, which Xander spent making phone calls about her apartment, her insurance, her belongings. He was efficient and commanding, the same way he'd been in that ambulance, taking charge of her life like he had every right to. She should probably be bothered by that, should insist on handling things herself, but it felt too good to let someone else shoulder the burden. To have someone who wanted to help, who seemed to need to help, as much for his own sake as for hers. By the time they walked out to his truck, a big black Dodge Ram that suited him perfectly, she was exhausted all over again. Xander helped her up into the passenger seat with hands on her waist, lifting her effortlessly, and the brief moment of being held against his chest made her dizzy. His apartment was 20 minutes away, on the 3rd floor of a renovated warehouse building. The moment he unlocked the door and ushered her inside, Veronica felt like she'd stepped into a different world. Exposed brick walls, high ceilings with original beams, an open concept space that was masculine and comfortable and surprisingly tidy. The furniture was simple but well made. She'd bet he'd built half of it himself. A leather couch faced a brick fireplace. The kitchen had butcher block counters and professional-grade appliances. Everything about it screamed capable man who took care of his space. "Guest rooms down the hall," Xander said, setting down the small bag of her salvaged belongings that the fire department had recovered. "You can have the bathroom first. I'll make us some lunch." She should take him up on that, should maintain the illusion that this was just a temporary, practical arrangement between 2 adults. Instead, she found herself saying, "Your couch looks comfortable." He went very still. "It is. Maybe I could just rest out here for a bit while you cook, if that's okay." Veronica. Her name was a warning and a plea and a question all at once. "I don't want to be alone," she admitted quietly. "I keep smelling smoke, keep feeling like I can't breathe. When you're close, it's better." Something in his expression shifted, softened, even as his eyes remained hungry. "Then you stay right here where I can see you." He made grilled cheese and tomato soup, simple, perfect comfort food that reminded her of childhood. They ate at his dining table, with the afternoon sun streaming through the industrial windows, and it felt bizarrely domestic, like they'd done this 100 times before, like they'd do it 100 times again. After lunch, the exhaustion finally caught up with her completely. Xander took one look at her face and stood, holding out his hand. "Come on, you need to actually sleep in a real bed." She let him lead her down the hall to the guest room. It was smaller than his master bedroom, she was sure, but still spacious and comfortable, with a queen bed made up in soft gray linens. He turned down the covers while she hovered in the doorway, suddenly unsure. "Xander, sleep," he said firmly. "I'll be right out in the living room. Shout if you need anything." "Okay," but she didn't move. He studied her face, then sighed. "What is it? Will you—" This was ridiculous. She was a grown woman. "Never mind. Tell me, will you stay? Just for a few minutes, until I fall asleep." The words tumbled out in a rush, mortifying and needy and completely unlike her. But Xander didn't look like he found her ridiculous. He looked like she'd just given him something precious. "Yeah, I'll stay." She climbed into the bed, still wearing the hospital-provided sweatpants and t-shirt, and Xander sat on the edge of the mattress, close enough to touch. His hand found hers under the covers, those same gentle circles on her palm. "Close your eyes," he murmured. She did, and felt the mattress dip as he shifted closer. Then his free hand touched her hair, stroking softly, and she thought she might die from how good it felt, how safe. "I've got you," he said quietly. "Nothing's going to hurt you, I promise." Veronica fell asleep to the rhythm of his breathing and the gentle touch of his fingers in her hair, and for the first time since the fire, she felt completely at peace. She woke to darkness and the smell of smoke. Her eyes flew open, panic slamming through her chest. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe. The smoke was everywhere, filling her lungs. "Veronica!" Hands on her shoulders, shaking her gently, a voice cutting through the terror. She gasped, flailed, and then the lamp clicked on and Xander's face swam into focus above her, creased with concern. "You're okay," he said urgently. "You're safe. It was a nightmare, just a nightmare." Reality crashed back. She wasn't in her burning apartment. She was in Xander's guest room, safe, alive. But her heart was still racing, her breath coming in short gasps, and tears were streaming down her face without her permission. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm sorry, Don't." He pulled her up and into his arms, crushing her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. "Don't apologize. You're allowed to have nightmares after what happened." She buried her face in his shoulder and let herself fall apart. Great shuddering sobs that she'd been holding back since the moment she'd woken up in that smoke, since she'd realized how close she'd come to dying alone and forgotten. Xander held her through all of it, murmuring soothing nonsense, his hands stroking her back, her hair, her arms. When the tears finally subsided into hiccups, she became aware of other things, like the fact that she was plastered against his bare chest, because apparently he'd been sleeping, or trying to, and had only pulled on a pair of sleep pants before coming to her. His skin was warm and smooth over hard muscle, and she could feel his heartbeat under her palm, steady and strong. Could smell him, clean and masculine, and something uniquely Xander that made her want to press closer. She should pull away, should put some distance between them before she did something truly stupid. But his arms were still around her, and she didn't want to move. Didn't want to lose this feeling of being held, being wanted, being protected. "Stay with me," she whispered against his shoulder. His arms tightened fractionally. "I am staying." "No, I mean..." She pulled back just enough to look at his face. "Stay here, in the bed. Don't go back to the couch." She watched him struggle with it, saw the war between what he should do and what he wanted to do, play out across his features. Professional distance versus the pull between them. Propriety versus need. Veronica, I don't think... Please. She put her hand over his heart, felt it jump under her palm. I can't be alone right now. I need you close. I need to know you're here. He closed his eyes briefly, jaw clenching. When he opened them again, the hunger in them made her breath catch. You don't know what you're asking. I do. Maybe she did. Maybe she understood exactly what she was inviting. Stay. If I get in that bed with you... He stopped, swallowed hard. I won't be able to keep my hands to myself. I won't be able to pretend this is just comfort. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered, and felt the tremor that ran through his powerful frame. You sure about this? His hand came up to cup her face, tilting it toward the light so he could search her eyes. Because once I touch you, I won't want to stop. Once I have you, I won't want to let you go. She should be terrified by the possession in his voice. The barely leashed need in his eyes should tell him this was too fast, too intense, too everything. Instead, she turned her face into his palm and kissed it. I'm sure. The sound he made was half groan, half growl. Then he was moving, shifting her back against the pillows, stretching out beside her on the bed. He pulled her into his arms, tucking her against his side, her head on his shoulder. One arm wrapped around her back, holding her close. The other hand found hers, threading their fingers together. Go back to sleep, he murmured against her hair. I'm not going anywhere. But sleep was the furthest thing from her mind, because every inch of her left side was pressed against him, his bare chest, his stomach, his hip, his powerful thigh. She could feel the heat of his skin through her thin t-shirt, could feel every breath he took, every tension in his muscles, could feel the evidence of exactly how much he wanted her, hard against her hip. Her own body responded traitorously, heat pooling low in her belly, her nipples tightening, her breath coming shorter. This was insane. She was supposed to be traumatized, exhausted, recovering, not hyper-aware of every point of contact between their bodies, not imagining what it would feel like to have his hands on her skin, his mouth on hers for real this time, not as a rescue, but as a claim. I can hear you thinking, Xander said, his voice rough. Stop it. I can't. His hand tightened on hers. Can't what? Can't stop thinking about... She cut herself off, mortified. About what? He shifted, tilting her face up so she had to look at him. His eyes were dark in the dim light from the lamp, pupils blown wide. Tell me. About you, she whispered. About how you feel. About how much I want. She didn't get to finish because his mouth was on hers. Not gentle, not tentative, claiming and demanding and absolutely devastating. His lips moved over hers with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. His hand cupped the back of her head, angling her just right, while his other arm banded around her waist, pulling her fully on top of him. She made a sound against his mouth, surprise or surrender or both, and opened for him. His tongue swept in, tasting her thoroughly, possessively, and God, this was nothing like the clinical press of lips during the rescue. This was fire and need and barely controlled desire. This was a man who'd been starving and had finally been given permission to feast. Her hands found his chest, his shoulders, his neck, touching everywhere she could reach. His skin was hot under her palms, muscles flexing as he moved. She felt small against him, delicate, feminine in a way she hadn't felt in years, and the way he held her, like she was precious and breakable, but also like he might devour her whole, made her dizzy with want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I've been dying to do that since the moment you opened your eyes and looked at me." "Why didn't you?" she managed. "Because I was trying to be good, trying to give you space, trying to pretend I didn't want to throw you over my shoulder and carry you off like some kind of caveman." His hand slid up her back, under her shirt, splaying hot against her skin. "But then you asked me to stay, and looked at me with those eyes, and fuck, Veronica, I'm only human." "I'm glad you're not being good anymore," she whispered, and kissed him again. This time he rolled them, pinning her beneath him, his weight pressing her into the mattress in a way that should have been frightening, but instead made her feel safe, protected, claimed. His mouth moved from her lips to her jaw, her neck, that sensitive spot behind her ear that made her gasp and arch against him. "Xander, tell me to stop," he growled against her skin. "Tell me this is too fast, too much. Tell me you need more time." She absolutely should. "Don't stop," she breathed instead. "Please don't stop." His mouth crashed back onto hers, and his hands were everywhere, sliding under her shirt, exploring her curves, learning her body with a thoroughness that made her shake. She matched him touch for touch, mapping the ridges of muscle across his back, his shoulders, his arms. He felt like he'd been carved from stone, all hard planes and masculine strength, and she wanted to explore every inch. When his hand found her chest, cupping her through the thin fabric of her bra, they both groaned. He broke the kiss to look at her, his eyes nearly black with desire. "I need to see you, need to touch you. Can I?" She nodded, beyond words, and he pushed her shirt up and off. His sharp inhale when he saw her made her feel powerful, desirable, wanted in ways she'd never experienced before. Then his mouth was on her skin, kissing, tasting, worshipping, and she lost all ability to think. "Perfect," he murmured against her stomach. "So fucking perfect." His hands were surprisingly gentle as they unhooked her bra, sliding it off her shoulders, bearing her completely. For a moment he just looked, his gaze so heated she felt it like a physical touch. Then his mouth found her chest and she cried out, her hands fisting in his hair, holding him to her. She'd never wanted anyone like this, had never felt this all-consuming need that burned away everything else, every doubt, every fear, every reason why this might be a bad idea. All that existed was Xander's mouth on her skin, his hands learning her body, the hard length of him pressed against her thigh, evidence of how much he wanted her in return. "I need you," she gasped. "Xander, I know." He kissed his way back up to her mouth, claiming it again in a kiss that tasted like promise and possession. "I know, baby. I've got you." His hand slid down her stomach, beneath the waistband of her sweatpants, and when his fingers found her, she shattered. Just from his touch, from the way he growled her name against her mouth, from the overwhelming sensation of being completely his, she came back to herself slowly, trembling and boneless in his arms. He held her through it, murmuring praise against her temple, his hand stroking her back in soothing circles. So beautiful, so perfect. My girl, my Veronica. My, that possessive word again, and it should bother her, should feel like too much too soon, but instead it felt right, like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to claim her like this, to want her this much. "Xander," she managed when she could speak again, I know what you want." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, achingly tender. And I'm going to give it to you. Every single thing you need, but not tonight. She blinked up at him, confused and frustrated. What? Not tonight, he repeated, brushing her hair back from her face. You're exhausted. You've been through trauma. And when I make love to you properly, his eyes burned into hers. I want you rested and sure and completely with me. I want hours to explore every inch of you. I want to hear every sound you make, learn everything that makes you fall apart, and I want you to remember every second of it. Heat flooded through her at his words, at the images they conjured. That's not fair. Life's not fair, sweetheart. But he was smiling, that devastating smile that made her heart flip over. Now sleep. I'll be right here. He pulled the covers up over both of them, tucking her securely against his side. She should protest, should point out that he'd just worked her into a frenzy and then left her hanging, that she could feel how much he still wanted her, hard and insistent against her hip, that it wasn't fair for him to be so controlled while she was falling apart. She was exhausted, and he was warm and solid beside her, and his hand was doing those gentle circles on her back again. Within minutes, she felt herself drifting, safe and satisfied and completely at peace. The last thing she was aware of was his lips against her temple, and his voice, low and fierce. Mine. You're mine now, Veronica. No going back. She fell asleep smiling, that possessive claim echoing in her dreams. She woke to morning light and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory flooded back. The fire, the rescue, Xander's apartment, Xander's bed, Xander's hands on her body, his mouth claiming hers. Oh God, she'd let her firefighter rescuer bring her home, kiss her senseless, and give her the most intense moment of her life, all within 24 hours of nearly dying. What was wrong with her? But even as the thought formed, she knew she didn't regret it, couldn't regret it. Not when the memory of his touch still made her shiver, not when she could still feel the ghost of his lips on hers. She found him in the kitchen, and the sight stopped her in her tracks. He was shirtless again. When did the man wear shirts? Standing at the stove, flipping pancakes with an ease that suggested this was routine for him. His back was to her, and she took a moment to appreciate the view. Broad shoulders tapering to a lean waist, muscles moving under tanned skin, a hint of tattoo disappearing beneath the waistband of his sleep pants. Morning, he said without turning around. Coffee's ready. Of course he'd known she was there. Firefighter senses or something. She padded over to the coffee pot, poured herself a cup, and tried to figure out what to say. Sorry I attacked you in bed was worse. Nice tattoo was just weird. How do you like your pancakes? He asked, still not looking at her, like he was giving her space to process. However you're making them is fine. He did turn then, spatula in hand, and the heat in his eyes when he saw her, rumpled and wearing his t-shirt that she'd apparently stolen at some point during the night, made her knees weak. Come here, he said quietly. She set down her coffee cup and moved to him like he'd commanded it. Maybe he had. When she was close enough, he set aside the spatula and pulled her against him, one arm around her waist, the other hand cupping her face. Morning, he said again, and kissed her. It was softer than last night's desperate kisses, but no less thorough. A good morning kiss from a boyfriend, a husband, someone who had every right to kiss her in his kitchen while making her breakfast. Except he wasn't any of those things. He was just a man who'd saved her life and was now letting her stay in his apartment because she had nowhere else to go. The thought must have shown on her face because he pulled back, studying her. What's wrong? Nothing, She stepped back, needing the distance to think clearly. We should probably talk about last night. Okay. He turned off the stove, plated the pancakes, and gestured to the table. Let's talk. They sat across from each other, and Veronica forced herself to meet his eyes. This is all moving really fast. It is, he agreed calmly. And you saved my life. There are probably power dynamics and trauma bonding and a dozen psychological reasons why I shouldn't be. Shouldn't be what? He prompted when she trailed off. Feeling what I'm feeling. The admission came out barely above a whisper. And what are you feeling? She looked at him, this beautiful, commanding man who'd crashed into her life and turned everything upside down, who'd pulled her from fire and breathed life back into her lungs, who looked at her like she was precious, who touched her like she was his. Like I want this to be real, she said quietly. Like I want you to keep looking at me the way you are right now. Like I want to stay here and cook breakfast with you and sleep in your arms and... She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. God, I sound crazy. You don't sound crazy. His voice was rough. You sound exactly like what I've been feeling since the moment I saw you. She looked up at him through her fingers. Really? Really. He reached across the table and pulled her hands away from her face, holding them in his. I know this is fast. I know all the reasons it shouldn't work. But I also know that the moment I saw you through that smoke, something in me just clicked. Like my whole life had been building to that moment. And when you opened your eyes and looked at me, I knew. Knew what? That you were mine. His thumbs stroked across her knuckles. That I was going to do whatever it took to keep you safe, keep you close, make you mine in every way that matters. Call it trauma bonding or power dynamics or whatever you want. I don't care. All I know is that I've never felt this before, and I'm not walking away from it. Her heart was pounding so hard, she was sure he could hear it. What if it's not real? What if it fades once things get normal again? Then we'll deal with that if it happens. He pulled her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. But I don't think it will. I think this is as real as it gets. And I think you feel it too, or you wouldn't have asked me to stay last night, wouldn't have kissed me back, wouldn't be sitting here in my shirt, looking like you belong here. She did feel like she belonged here. That was the terrifying part. After one day, Xander's apartment felt more like home than her own place ever had. Xander felt more like hers than anyone she'd ever dated. I'm scared, she admitted. Of me? Of this, of how much I want it, of how much it's going to hurt if it doesn't work out. He stood, tugging her up with him, and wrapped her in his arms. She went willingly, pressing her face against his chest, breathing in his scent. I can't promise it won't hurt, he said against her hair. But I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure it does work out. I'll fight for this, Veronica. For you. Every damn day. She tilted her head back to look at him. Why? Because you're worth fighting for. He kissed her forehead, her cheekbone, the corner of her mouth. because I held you in my arms while you weren't breathing, and I've never been so terrified in my life. Because when you opened your eyes, I felt like I could breathe again. Because everything makes sense when I'm with you, and nothing makes sense when I'm not. How was she supposed to resist that? How was she supposed to be practical and cautious and sensible when he was saying things that made her heart feel 3 sizes too big for her chest? "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? Okay, let's try this. Let's see where it goes. Let's be crazy together." His smile was brilliant, transforming his face from beautiful to absolutely devastating. "Yeah? Yeah." She pulled his head down for a kiss, pouring everything she felt into it, the fear and the hope and the wanting and the trust. "But we're taking it one day at a time." "I can do one day at a time," he said against her lips, "as long as I get all your days." They ate breakfast together, and it felt normal, natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. He told her about his plans for the day, checking in with his station chief, making some calls about her apartment repairs, running errands. She told him she needed to contact her insurance company, call her job, figure out her next steps. "You can do all that from here," he said. "Use my laptop. Make yourself at home. Actually," he pulled out his keys, worked one off the ring, and held it out to her. "Here, you shouldn't be locked out of your own home." She stared at the key like it was a live grenade. "Xander, I can't." "You can. You're staying here. You need a key. It's practical." It wasn't practical. It was symbolic. It was significant. It was him handing her access to his life, his space, his everything. But she took it anyway, closing her fingers around the cool metal, and watched satisfaction flash across his face. He left an hour later, kissing her thoroughly at the door like he was going off to war instead of just errands. "Call if you need anything, and I mean anything. Promise." "I promise." Good girl. That phrase again, and the way it made her feel, was rapidly becoming addictive. She spent the day making phone calls and filling out insurance forms and trying to salvage what she could of her old life. Her boss at the clinic was understanding about her needing time off. Her insurance agent was helpful, but warned that the claims process would take time. Her friends, the few she had, were sympathetic but distant, offering help but not really understanding what she was going through. Xander called 3 times just to check in, his voice warm and concerned, and somehow exactly what she needed to hear. By the time he came home that evening with Chinese takeout and a bag from the drugstore with toiletries he thought she might need, Veronica felt like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to just take care of her like this. They ate dinner on the couch with a movie playing that neither of them watched. He told her about his day, the meetings, the errands, the conversation with his captain about her case. She told him about her day, the insurance headaches, the inventory of lost possessions, the strange feeling of being displaced. "I talked to my boss about taking some time off," he said casually. "Got approved for 2 weeks, so I can help you get everything sorted." She turned to stare at him. "Xander, you don't have to do that. I can handle—" "I know you can handle it." He set aside his food and pulled her against his side, tucking her into his shoulder. "But you don't have to handle it alone. Let me help. Let me be here for you. You've already done so much." "Not enough." He tilted her face up to his. "Never enough. Don't you get it yet? I want to do this. Need to do this. You're not a burden, Veronica. You're—" He stopped, jaw clenching like he was holding back words. "I'm what?" she prompted. "Everything," he said simply. "You're everything." And then he was kissing her again, and she was kissing him back, and somehow they ended up horizontal on the couch, with him above her, his weight pressing her down in that way that made her feel safe and desired and completely overwhelmed. His hands mapped her body through her clothes, and hers did the same, learning the feel of him, the strength of him, the way he trembled when she touched certain places. "Bedroom," he growled against her mouth. "Now, while I can still walk." She nodded, breathless, and he stood, pulling her up with him. But instead of letting her walk, he swept her up into his arms like she weighed nothing, carrying her down the hall to his bedroom. His room was as masculine as the rest of his apartment. Dark colors, simple furniture, a huge bed with navy sheets. He set her down beside it and looked at her, his eyes asking permission, seeking consent. "Yes," she whispered, answering the unspoken question. "Yes, Sander, please." His control snapped. He hauled her against him, kissing her with a hunger that matched her own, his hands already working at her clothes. She returned the favor, tugging at his shirt, desperate to feel his skin against hers. Within moments they were both bare, and she had a moment to appreciate the full picture. All that sculpted muscle, the tattoo she'd glimpsed covering his left ribs, the evidence of how much he wanted her. Then he lifted her onto the bed and followed her down, covering her body with his, and all thought fled. That night he showed her exactly what he'd meant about taking his time. His hands and mouth explored every inch of her, learning what made her gasp, what made her moan, what made her beg. He was thorough and demanding and devastatingly skilled, pulling pleasure from her in waves until she was shaking and incoherent and completely his. When he finally moved over her, settling between her thighs, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Last chance to change your mind." "I'm not changing my mind." She pulled him down for a kiss. "I want this. I want you. Make me yours." And he did, joining their bodies in one slow, perfect thrust that made them both groan. For a moment he just held there, letting her adjust, his forehead pressed to hers. "Perfect," he breathed. "So fucking perfect. My Veronica. Mine." Then he started to move, and it was everything. Every fear, every doubt, every reason this shouldn't work. All of it burned away in the heat between them. There was only Xander above her, around her, inside her. Only the way he moved, the way he touched her, the way he said her name like a prayer and a claim and a promise all at once. When she shattered, it was with his name on her lips and his eyes locked on hers, watching her fall apart in his arms. He followed moments later with a groan that sounded like surrender and triumph combined, and she felt the truth of it in her bones. She was his now, completely, irrevocably, and he was hers. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts racing, breath slowing, hands gentle where before they'd been desperate. Xander pulled the sheets up over them and gathered her close, tucking her head under his chin. "Stay," he murmured against her hair. "I am staying." "No, I mean stay. Move in. Don't go back to your apartment when it's repaired. Stay here with me." She pulled back enough to see his face. "Xander, that's... I know it's fast. I don't care. I want you here. Want to wake up with you every morning and come home to you every night. Want your things mixed with mine and your name on my emergency contacts. Want everything, Veronica, with you." She should say it was too soon, should insist they wait, take things slow, be reasonable, but nothing about this had been reasonable from the start, and she didn't want to start now. "Okay," she whispered, and felt him go still against her. "Okay? Okay, I'll stay. I'll move in. She took a breath, steadying herself. "I'll be yours." "You already are." He kissed her, deep and claiming. You've been mine since the moment I pulled you out of that smoke, but now it's official." He made love to her again, slower this time, tender and reverent, like he was worshipping every inch of her skin. And when she fell asleep in his arms, sated and safe and completely at peace, she knew this was where she belonged. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of domesticity and desire. Xander took his time off and spent it helping her navigate insurance claims and apartment repairs and the logistics of combining their lives. They packed up her salvageable belongings together, and he made space in his closets, his drawers, his bathroom, made space in his life like she'd always been meant to fit there. They cooked together, ate together, fell asleep tangled together every night. He introduced her to his friends at the firehouse, his arm around her waist, his introduction casual. "This is Veronica, my girlfriend." Like it was the most natural thing in the world, like they hadn't only known each other for weeks. His friends teased him about falling fast, but they welcomed her warmly, and she could see how much they respected him, how much they cared about him. It made her fall even harder, seeing him in this context, seeing the man who risked his life to save strangers, who was beloved by his team, who came home to her every day and looked at her like she was his entire world. Her own life adjusted more easily than she'd expected. Her colleagues at the clinic were supportive when she told them about Xander, curious but kind. Her few friends were shocked by how quickly things had moved, but happy for her when they saw how he looked at her, how he touched her, how he couldn't seem to go more than an hour without texting her something sweet or ridiculous, or both. And through it all, the desire never faded. If anything, it intensified. They couldn't keep their hands off each other. Stolen kisses in the kitchen, urgent coupling against the shower wall, lazy morning sex that made them both late for work. He was insatiable, and she matched him, unable to get enough of the way he touched her, the way he made her feel, the way he said her name when he was inside her. 6 weeks after the fire, Xander came home from his shift with a strange look on his face. Nervous, excited, determined. "What's wrong?" Veronica asked from the couch where she'd been reading. "Nothing's wrong." He sat beside her, took her hands in his. "Everything's right. That's the problem." She laughed. "That's not a problem. It is when I can't wait anymore." He took a breath. "I love you. I've loved you since the moment you opened your eyes and looked at me like I was your whole world. And I know it's only been 6 weeks, and people will say we're crazy, but I don't care. I want to marry you, Veronica. Want to put a ring on your finger and tell the whole world you're mine. Want to build a life with you, have kids with you if you want them, grow old with you. I want everything, and I want it with you." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "Xander, I'm not asking yet," he said quickly. "I know we need more time, but I needed you to know. Needed you to know that this isn't temporary for me, that I'm all in, that I'm planning a future with you in it, and if you need time to catch up, that's okay. I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes." Tears were streaming down her face, and she couldn't seem to stop them. "You don't have to wait." He went very still. "What?" "You don't have to wait. I love you too. Have loved you probably since that first kiss in the hospital. And I want everything with you too. The ring, the wedding, the life, the kids, all of it. She laughed through her tears. We're both crazy. Thank God, he breathed, and pulled her into his lap, kissing her hard. Thank God. I have the ring already. It's been burning a hole in my dresser for 3 weeks. 3 weeks? I would have asked sooner, but I was trying to be reasonable. He grinned against her mouth. Turns out reasonable is overrated. Show me the ring. He practically ran to the bedroom, returning with a small velvet box. When he opened it, Veronica gasped. The ring was perfect, simple, elegant, exactly what she would have chosen. A round diamond on a white gold band, classic and beautiful. Xander, it's... Say yes, he interrupted, and suddenly he was on one knee in front of her, box in hand, eyes bright with hope and love and certainty. Marry me, Veronica. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worth the leap you took when you said yes to staying with me. Let me love you and protect you and make you happy every single day. Say yes. Yes, she said, crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, yes, yes. He slid the ring on her finger, a perfect fit, of course, and stood, pulling her into his arms. Mine, he said against her mouth. Finally, officially, completely mine. Yours, she agreed, always. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the firehouse with his team and her colleagues and a few close friends. Veronica wore a simple white dress, and Xander wore his dress uniform. And when they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. I promise to love you every day, Xander said, his voice rough with emotion. To keep you safe, keep you close, keep you happy. To be your shelter in every storm and your comfort in every fear. You saved my life when you opened your eyes and chose to live. Now I choose to spend that life with you. Veronica could barely speak through her tears. I promise to trust you with my heart, with my fears, with my everything. You pulled me from fire and breathed life back into me. And every day since, you've shown me what it means to be loved completely. I choose you, today and every day. When the officiant pronounced them married and Xander kissed her, the applause was deafening. But all Veronica could hear was his voice whispering against her lips. My wife, finally. My husband, she whispered back, and felt the rightness of it settle deep in her bones. That night, in the apartment that was now officially theirs, Xander carried her over the threshold like they were in some old-fashioned romance. She laughed against his shoulder, giddy with happiness and champagne and the sheer joy of belonging to him. Welcome home, Mrs. Hayes, he said, setting her down in the bedroom. I've been home for months, she pointed out. This isn't new. It's new. He turned her around, slowly unzipping her dress. You're my wife now. That's everything. The dress pooled at her feet, and he turned her to face him, his eyes dark with desire and love and possession. My wife, my Veronica, mine. Yours, she agreed, reaching for him. Always yours. He made love to her as his wife, and it was different somehow. More intense, more meaningful, more everything. When they lay tangled together afterward, rings glinting in the lamplight, hearts still racing, Veronica thought about the fire that had brought them together, the smoke that had nearly killed her, the moment she'd opened her eyes to find this beautiful, commanding man breathing life back into her lungs. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For saving me, for not giving up, for giving me mouth to mouth and then never being able to stop tasting me." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Best rescue of my career. Best almost death of mine. Don't even joke about that." He tightened his arms around her. "I still have nightmares about finding you too late." "But you didn't. You found me exactly when you were supposed to." She tilted her head to look at him. "You found me and saved me and loved me. And now I get to spend the rest of my life with you." "Damn right you do." He kissed her, slow and deep and perfect. "Every night in my arms, every morning in my bed, every moment mine." "Every moment yours," she agreed. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, safe and loved and completely at peace, Veronica couldn't help but think that sometimes the best things in life came from the worst moments. Sometimes you had to nearly lose everything to find what you were always meant to have. Sometimes you had to faint in the smoke to find the man who would breathe life into you every single day for the rest of your life. And sometimes, when a firefighter gave you mouth to mouth, he saved more than just your life. He saved your heart, your soul, your everything. She was his, he was hers, and that was all that mattered. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell us which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching.